Hey there, welcome to another episode of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is some toys that I recently picked up at a yard sale. Now, before I get into talking about my yard sale finds, I just want to quickly address my setup here. If you've watched my show before, you know that I always shoot my videos from my little man cave here. It's just kind of a spare bedroom I have downstairs in my house. And I used to shoot these things just from a small kind of floating tabletop I kept in the middle of my room. So you could always see all my stuff behind me. And then just a couple of weeks ago, I got a new desk, which up against the wall, so it kind of gave me a nice stationary place to sit. And you'll see that later when I'm shooting the actual toys. It's given me a better place to shoot the toys because it's a white surface against the white wall, so you don't have to worry about the depth and other things distracting you in the background. I think that's been working out pretty good for me for shooting the toys. But as far as shooting myself in these little intros and outros, I don't think it's been working quite as well because I'm pressed up against this wall, so you see the whole room behind me, and I've got this overhead lamp casting weird shadows. And because I'm sitting at this end of the room, you couldn't really see anything in detail. So you could kind of see I had a bunch of toys back there, but it's probably hard for you to see what any of it was. Anyway, so I've been trying to figure out what's a better way I can shoot these things. So this here is just another experiment. I have this little chair kind of tucked into the corner of my room. It probably won't even stay here, but it just fits in between the wall and my new desk. So it's just kind of crammed in here right now. I might end up getting some new bookshelves so I can put some more action figures in this corner, because presently it's like really the only corner of my room that I don't currently have toys displayed in. So I know right now this is kind of a boring background for a video about a toy collector because you wouldn't even know I had any toys. I've got this like little mounted picture from a reprint of an old Spider-Man cover. There's another one just above it. And then I've got this signed picture of Elvira here, which is pretty cool, but not really toy related. Just out of the corner of the shot, you can see I've got some old Adventure Person vehicle kind of tacked up to my wall. So once I shot down to shoot this and I realized, oh hey, I've got the little corner of the desk kind of in the way there. I wonder if there's a way I can shimmy that out of the way. And but then I thought, hey, well, you know what? I'm sitting here wearing my Ron Burgundy shirt. I could display a figure here, and I had a Ron Burgundy sitting on the bookshelf right over here, so I just grabbed him. And so yeah, he's keeping me company right now, but he really has nothing to do with the video today. This is not an Anchorman themed video. So yeah, I just want to talk about the yard sale that I went to. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about my collecting. I collect a lot of new stuff. Like I'm buying Transformers, I'm buying Masters Universe, even though that line is kind of fizzled out. I'm buying Marvel Legends. I still buy the occasional like DC related figure. I buy G.I.Joes, so I'm buying the new 6-inch line. Before that, I'd been buying the 3 3/4 inch line. I buy all kinds of random stuff. I'm buying NECA's TMNT line. Yeah, it goes on and on. And plus, I collect a lot of comic books too. So there's a lot of money every month that I'm spending on new stuff. So when it comes to older vintage stuff, that's just not really something I typically seek out. My older brother, who's also a collector, he's kind of the opposite. He buys some new stuff, but he spends most of his time kind of hunting down like old comic books and things like that. So he goes to a lot of old like comic book shows, trying to fill holes in collections. With me, I'm kind of just looking forward, buying new stuff. I don't really seek out anything old. And the same is kind of true of toys. So my brother, he goes to the yard sales a lot and he buys comic books and toys and stuff on the regular. And so there's this one guy that he knows from the flea market circuit who emailed him and said, hey man, I've got some G.I. Joes. I'm going to have kind of a private yard sale. You can't go too crazy because we're still, dealing with COVID stuff here. So he said he was sending out an email to people that he thought would be interested to come to this sale at his house at like 9 in the morning last weekend. And so my brother let me know. He's like, are you interested in going to this like G.I. Joe specific yard sale? And that kind of stuff never comes up. Like in my area, we don't have toy shows. Like we have the occasional comic show, but even that's rare. I think we mostly have like some hockey card shows and things like that. But I've never been aware of there just being a specific toy show where people are selling used toys or anything like that. So yeah, to go to a yard sale where it was just old vintage G.I. Joes, of course I'm going to go. And I still love 80s G.I. Joes. Like, I have a good sized collection of them, because the thing is, I collected them right from 1982 when the line began. But me and my brother, we collected it together. So every time a new wave of figures came out, we would kind of do pixies on who would get what. Because if you aren't familiar with old vintage G.I. Joes, you get a new package, and on the back of the pack there'd be little pictures of all the new toys that came out that year. So yeah, we get, we usually just discover that there was a new wave of Joes. One day we'd be at the store and we're like, oh crap, new G.I. Joes. Mom and Dad would buy one for us each, and then we'd know over the course of the next 6 months to a year we'd need to accumulate the whole rest of the wave. And we would say, okay, I want this guy, and he'd say, I want this guy, I want this guy. So over the course of my childhood collecting, I ended up with pretty much exactly half of the vintage 80s G.I. Joe collection, my brother with the other half. So as an adult collector, I'm missing a lot of key characters from the vintage G.I. Joe toy line, which is kind of a bummer. The same was true of pretty much any toy line, because we collected everything like that. So I was missing half the Transformers, half the wrestlers, half the Star Wars characters, all that sort of stuff. But G.I. Joe was our favorite line, and that was like really the only line from my childhood that we collected together that I kept everything. Like, I got rid of my vintage Transformers and vintage wrestlers, so I wasn't that bummed about having half of a collection. But with G.I. Joe, yeah, I kind of sucked that I didn't have Duke and that I didn't have Destro and all that sort of stuff. So over the years, I have slowly been filling those holes. I've gotten quite a few characters by kind of picking up collections here and there, just like in small little clusters, just lots of figures. But yeah, I still have quite a few vintage holes in my collection. And I'd never bothered to compile lists to know exactly what I needed, because like I said, I never really made it a priority to seek them out. But when my brother told me that this yard sale was going to be all vintage 80s and 90s Joes, I figured, you know what, if I'm going to go to this thing, I better go armed with what I actually need. So I put together a checklist of everything I had from the vintage toy line, which ran from 82 right up to 1994. And to my surprise, I actually accumulated quite a bit of it over the last few years, and I didn't have nearly as many holes as I thought. So I went there hunting for figures. I didn't know how many figures there would be, because the guy who had emailed my brother had sent him some pictures that he had taken of the figures he was going to be selling, and he kind of sent them along in an email as a bit of a teaser. And so when I saw these pictures, it was a lot of vehicles. I'll put the pictures up here, and you'll see we're talking about the Flag, which is the G.I. Joe 6-foot aircraft carrier, which is very desirable by a lot of collectors. He had multiple Defiant shuttles. He had just tons and tons of vehicles that I'm sure a lot of Joe collectors would be freaking out with the amount of stuff that he had at this yard sale. I, however, am not a vehicle collector, so I was mostly looking for the figures, and the pictures that were sent didn't really show exactly how many figures or what figures he had. So that was going to be kind of a luck of the draw, I guess. I was just hoping that he'd have what I needed. So anyway, me and my brother, we show up at this yard sale. He picks me up at like 8:30, which is pretty early. It was a Saturday night after I'd been drinking and playing poker the night before. I'm not used to getting up that early on a Saturday, but, for G.I. Joe, why not? So he picked me up at 8:30. I didn't realize this yard sale was actually like maybe 5 minutes from my house. We go there. We get there at like maybe 10 to 9, and there was probably 15 guys there, all standing around this outside the doors of this double garage. And there was a bunch of G.I. Joe stuff on like a big tarp out in the yard, and nobody was looking at it. And I was like, "Is that the sale? Like, is everybody's here chatting and socializing? Like, should I go and take a look and get first dibs? Like, what are we waiting for?" And so I kind of asked the guy, I'm like, "So is this good to go? Can I go shop?" And he said, "Oh, well, the sale's in the garage. I'm going to open that up at 9 o'clock. I'm waiting for a couple other people to show up." He's like, "But that stuff on the tarp, that's all free stuff. So if there's anything you want, go ahead and grab it." Now, it was a ton of stuff. There was like 3 Tomahawk helicopters there, multiple like Havocs and Cobra Snowwolves and all this stuff. But it was mostly just the shells. Like, everything was incomplete. So there was no weapons. Some of them were missing doors, maybe missing wheels. And again, I'm not a vehicle collector, so even though some of this stuff was like really cool stuff that I've never owned or that I used to own, and I was just like, man, it would be really cool to grab a shuttle, but it's just an empty husk of the shuttle. What am I going to do with it? Am I going to display it? Probably not. It's probably going to just go in my crawl space and gather dust. So I didn't grab really anything. There was one item I grabbed off of the free tarp, and it was not a G.I. Joe item, which I'll show you that in a moment. And then at 9 o'clock, he lifted those doors open, and by that point there was probably 20 guys there, and they just kind of stormed the place. And I kind of said, oh, you know what, I'm going to sit back. You know, this is kind of a bummer because I don't want to miss out on everything. I was worried everybody's going to grab all the figures I would want. So I kind of just hung back and worked my way through. And by the time I got to the figures, they had already been picked through pretty good, but I managed to get, I think, a dozen figures that I needed to fill holes in my collection. So all in all, it went pretty well. I mean, it was a good score. So yeah, without any further ado, let me show you what I picked up. Now, before I get into talking about the G.I. Joes, I want to show you the free item I picked up off of the tarp. So this is what I grabbed. Now, this looks like it could very easily be a G.I. Joe toy because it's a Cobra, and even the look of the Cobra, it really matches up with the Cobra logo. But what this actually is, it's from a toy line called Stariors that was produced by Tomy in 1984. And it was like one of these short-lived toys that only had one wave of figures, kind of like the Sectors back in the day. And I really loved these things. I had just one of the humanoid robots. So basically there was these humanoid type robots. So this here is Crank. And there was, a few of these guys, and there was a couple little teeny kind of vehicle robots they hung out with. And then there was this big armored battle station. So like this guy here, like you see he's got a little little pilot inside of his cockpit. And it was a really fun figure. Like he's not really articulated. His arms move, his head moves. But that's because they all just come apart like very easily. So the cool thing about that was it was very interchangeable. Oh, he does have knees. So yeah, he has a little bit of articulation. But none on the arms. And then they had these little action features where you wind them up. And then you flick this little lock, and then his action feature kicks into gear. So they all had different things. Some guys had drills, some guys had claws. Anyway, yeah, so I loved this dude. And I wanted more of these figures. They were just really hard to come by. And each character came with a little mini comic book, and Marvel actually published a mini series as well. So I have the mini comic that came with Crank, and I have the whole Marvel series. So I really liked the storyline with these guys, and I would have liked to have more figures, but like I said, they just were hard to come by, and there weren't that many to chase after to begin with. So why their battle station was Cobra themed, I'm not really sure. Like, it doesn't really seem to line up with the aesthetic of the robots. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I wasn't grabbing it because it was a Starior. I was grabbing it because I thought this would make a cool display for my G.I. Joes. I could put this behind Cobra Commander, and it just looks like a cool, I don't know, statue, some sort of secret weapon that Cobra would have. So yeah, it's nothing that I intend to play with. I just think it will look cool displayed behind my Cobras on the shelf. So it doesn't do a whole lot. It has this little button on the back, which makes its mouth open and it reveals like a laser cannon. You pull this little switch on the back, and this little ramp opens up. So I imagine at one point little vehicles could have driven outside of them. And the thing is, this is only part of the battle station. There was actually a big, like, circular base that he came out of, and the base was actually there too. And I'm kind of wondering, maybe I should have grabbed it. The thing was free. I think it was missing all of its pieces. But it was pretty cool because it's kind of big round, like kind of octagonal shape. This Cobra bit slides into it. And so then it was this big, I don't know, it looked almost more like a turtle with a Cobra head, but I guess you could say it was like a coiled up Cobra. But that round base opened up into a kind of a headquarters. And my thought process was, like, I definitely don't have room to display it with this big base on it. And it's not like I'm going to have a whole Stariors shelf. So if I want to display it behind my G.I. Joes, that big base isn't going to really do anything for me. And it was kind of incomplete. So I didn't bother grabbing it. I just grabbed the head. Like I said, maybe I should have grabbed the base just in case I ever decide to display it or want to try and complete it. But regardless, for just a free little pick-me-up, I think this guy is pretty cool. Now this here is the other non-G.I. Joe item I picked up. Because this was a G.I. Joe yard sale, but he did have some other toys there. Like, for example, he had some original 1980s Transformers like Soundwave and Blaster. He had some Voltron figures. And so some people grabbed that stuff as well, but most people just went right for the G.I. Joes. So where I kind of hung back a little bit, I was able to kind of cruise the tables in the front that had some of that non-G.I. Joe stuff on there. And so I saw this bag of army ants for $10. And it looks like there's, I don't know, what do we got? 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 Battle Beasts in there. So, pretty good deal. Battle Beasts were a toy line produced by Hasbro in 1987. Again, this was not, I don't think, a very successful toy line because they did not continue it beyond the initial wave of figures. But basically the gist of it is they were these small little army men that were ants. So you see here, they all have, 4 arms and then 2 legs. So they're, 6 appendages. And they don't move at all. Very minimal paint apps. Like, there's a lot of sculpted detail, like his boots, the pockets. Some of them might have had bandoliers and, holsters. And it just, none of it was painted. So this guy here, he's just got his binoculars and his belt. And then they all had these squishy rubber abdomens, which you could pop off. Like, I remember it being easier. There you go. So yeah, I don't know why they popped off. I guess you could interchange them. I don't know why you'd necessarily do that. Anyway, so when these things came out, there was originally 2 factions. So there was the orange ants and the blue ants. I collected the orange ants, and my brother Doug collected the blue ants. Now, I got rid of the few army ants I had. I did not have the full collection. There wasn't that many. There was maybe 40 ants on each side, if that. I think I might have had, 7 or 8 of them. Anyway, I got rid of them. But then for Christmas one year, my brother gave me a bag of orange army ants. He gave me about 6 or 7 back. And so I was like, that was pretty cool. And I always kind of wished I had finished this collection. So the fact that I get these 13, that's pretty cool. So this guy here, I don't know why I keep showing you him. He's probably my least favorite because he doesn't even really look much like an ant. So let's see what else we got here. So we got this dude here. Now, I don't remember any of these characters' names. They did all have names. So this guy here, you can see his more ant-like face. He's got his little antennae coming out there. And yeah, so he's got, looks like maybe I don't know if that's a canteen or ammunition. But one thing these guys are missing, which is kind of a bummer, is their guns. There was one gun in the bag. So it belongs to one of these guys. I'm not sure which. I don't think this guy, because you'll see the peg in his hand is here, and there's a peg on the gun there. So this would plug into somebody else's arm. So this guy is kind of sculpted in a weird pose since he doesn't have his gun. So I don't know, yeah, one of these days I might have to try and track down some army ants guns. Now at the time when I grabbed this bag, they were just all clumped together. I didn't realize there were so many doubles in the bag. So I do actually have that guy. He was in there twice. Then I got this guy. Now he was in there just the one time. And this guy might actually be the leader of the orange ants. His name was General Pat Ant, after General Patton. So yeah, again, you see here, very ant-like face. He's pretty cool. Then I got 2 of this guy. Now, I had this guy when I was a kid too, and he kind of looks like he kind of reminded me of like Spirit from G.I. Joe, kind of like a shaman character, maybe because he's got the bow and the arrow. It looks like he's got a bandana around his head. So yeah, he always just kind of reminded me of Spirit. Then I got 2 of this guy here. Now, he's got, looks like maybe a little periscope or something. I think I had this guy when I was a kid too. I can't remember his name, but yeah, he looks kind of cool with his little cap on backwards there. Then I got the diver. So he's pretty cool. He's got some kind of gross green shit growing on him there. But either way, I guess that's what happens. Probably from somebody having him underwater when they were kids. Then I got this guy here. Now he looks like he's kind of excitable, mouth open, kind of freaking out. So yeah, I got 2 of him in the package. I got 1 of this guy. Now it looks like he's holding maybe some like missiles or something there. I'm not sure. but he's pretty cool. Looks like he might have had a backpack at one point. And then I got this guy here, who was a Bazooka Trooper. Now, he looks really out of place because his bazooka is missing. But he's one of the figures that my brother Doug got me for Christmas that year. So I do have the Bazooka Soldier here with the bazooka. So that's what he would look like with his weapon. So yeah, all of these guys would be better if they had their weapons. But for less than $1 a piece, you know, I don't mind grabbing them. It was kind of a fun little bag of things to pick up. Now, as for the significance of their abdomens, everyone I had as a kid, I think, had a purple abdomen. And all the ones I have from my collection that Doug got me, they all have purple abdomens. And you know what? This is the general right here. This is General Pat Ant, now that I see him. So yeah, I already had that guy. So yeah, of all these guys I had, they all had purple abdomens. So yeah, I've got 2 here with red abdomens, which is kind of weird. I don't know where they came from. At first I was thinking maybe it was the blue guys that had the red abdomens and maybe these had been swapped out. But I actually have 1 blue army ant in my collection, and it's the diver from the blue team. You see, he's also got that green stuff growing on him, so it probably is from going underwater. Anyway, he's got the green abdomen, and that reminded me that, yeah, all the ones Doug had when we were kids had these green abdomens. So yeah, I'm not sure what the deal is with the red ones. But anyway, that's my army ant haul from the yard sale. Okay, so here's my first G.I. Joe item that I'm going to show you. So this was the G.I. Joe Jeep was originally released back at the start of the line in 1982. It was called the Vamp. I can't remember what it stood for. It was some weird acronym. Anyway, it was re-released in 1988 because they released a sub-team called Tiger Force, where they released a bunch of the older figures in kind of a Tiger deco, and then they re-released a bunch of the old vehicles in the Tiger deco as well. So yeah, this, I don't think they just called it the Tiger Force Vamp. I'm sure it had a different name. I'll have to look that up afterwards. But anyway, even though I didn't go in there looking for vehicles, you can see this one here was $5. And the Vamp was one of the most, like, the simplest and coolest G.I. Joe vehicles. Like, it's missing pieces. Like, it used to have, like, some gas cans that went in the back, and it had, like, a gun that was mounted back here. But even without any of the add-ons, it also had a steering wheel, which is missing. But just on its own, like, it still holds up as a cool vehicle. So yeah, I didn't want to pass on this. So for $5, I thought, why the hell not? Now, I might not have room to display it in my current collection. It might just end up in a box, unfortunately. But still, for $5, I was willing to take a stab at it. Now, you might be noticing something here. I think most people that watch my videos are in the States and whatnot. And you'll notice this is something that was common on G.I. Joe vehicles released in Canada, is that it's got the Canadian flag, it's got these Canada stickers. So these aren't custom made, that's how they were released in Canada. I think most of my vintage G.I. Joe vehicles have Canadian flags and stuff on them. So there you go, if you weren't aware of that. Now this one here, it needs to be cleaned up for sure. It's got some like schmutz here on the front. I don't know what that's all about. It might be some mold or grossness, I don't know. So I'll definitely have to clean this thing up. But yeah, for $5, pretty cool. And besides that, I've got 2 figures. These guys are both 1987 figures. I just stuck them here in the Jeep. But and I got these guys at the yard sale. But I didn't really feel the need to show them off. Not that you guys know the difference, but I already had these figures in my collection. These were not 2 of the guys that I needed. Now, these were both characters that I had as a kid growing up. And I liked these guys both a lot. And I actually made them pal around with each other because they came out the same year and their colors complemented each other. So that made me decide that they were going to be friends. So yeah, these guys palled around a lot when I played with them as a kid. And I love both of these figures. But these are duplicates for me. I didn't really need them. But for whatever reason, he had a couple of the figures double bagged. So this guy was packaged with another guy that I wanted. And this guy was packaged with another guy I wanted. So it did, and the price was no different. All the G.I. Joe figures that I've got were only $5. So I got this guy and another guy for $5, and so really only $2.50 a piece. And yeah, even though they don't have any of their accessories, they're complete, they're in good shape, they don't have any broken thumbs or any broken crotches, and the elastic holding them together, that's all good. So yeah, for $2.50, I think that's a great score. Now, also from 1987 is Sea Slug. So this guy here is a Cobra Trooper, and he piloted... it was like a Cobra submarine. The name is escaping me at the very moment. But anyway, that was a vehicle that my brother Doug had. So yeah, so he had this guy when we were kids, and he was a guy that I needed. And he's one of the guys that I thought would maybe be a little harder to track down just because he was a vehicle driver. People might be selling him with the vehicle, which is something I didn't really want to have to buy. So yeah, to find him loose, that's pretty great. And he's in good shape. Like he's got this silver logo painted on there. And I can imagine that'd be the kind of thing that would rub off on this figure in certain situations. But this guy, he's in good shape. He's not scuffed up. So the only issue might be that he's missing accessories. But vehicle drivers often did not come with any accessories. So I actually don't know if I'm missing anything with this guy. At most, he might have came with a pistol or a rifle. But I kind of doubt even that. So as long as you don't consider him incomplete without the submarine, what was it, the manta ray or something? I don't know. I'll put a picture up here and I'll find out the name. But yeah, as far as the figure goes, I think he's pretty well complete and he's in great shape. So that was a pretty cool find. Also from 1987, we have Taurus. So this guy here was one of Sergeant Slaughter's Renegades, and they came in a 3-pack. So it was Red Dog, Mercer, and Taurus. And there were 2 3-packs released that year. There was the 3 kind of monstrous Cobra villains that were Cobra Law, and I had that 3-pack when I was a kid. My brother Doug had the Renegades 3-pack. So I have not accumulated any of these guys over the years, so I needed all 3 of them. And unfortunately, they only had Taurus. Mercer was my favorite of the lot, but Taurus is pretty cool too. So it's pretty nice to get him. Now, I know he is missing weapons. I won't say that every time, because all these guys are missing weapons. So, but that really doesn't matter to me. And it might have actually worked to my benefit because, like I said, I kind of went into the yard sale after everybody else had gone through it. And I was there for figures, and I was really worried everybody else was going to grab all the figures, especially when I saw how cheap they were. I was surprised that people hadn't grabbed them all up. But I was rooting through them, and I was picking a couple up. And one guy beside me said, like, oh, that guy doesn't have his gun. And I'm like, oh, I don't care if he has his gun or not. And he was like, well, that's what makes them worth something. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm just here to buy the figures. I don't really care about the value. And he just kind of shrugged at me. So that kind of probably worked to my benefit. If these guys that were there were just looking for complete figures, and these guys that were incomplete didn't interest them, that was great because it allowed me to scoop a bunch of them up. So I actually have the modern version of Taurus. And for whatever reason, probably some copyright issue, they changed his name. So you'll see here on his display base, it says Bull. But, so this was a cool figure. I like this more modern look. But at the same time, I don't like that they got rid of his mustache. He's just got kind of that Abe Lincoln beard on this one, which I always thought was kind of a strange choice. Like, why get rid of his mustache? Because he kind of has this, the beard and mustache is kind of iconic on this guy. It's kind of like a swirly strongman mustache. So yeah, I don't know why they got rid of it in the modern era. But you can see the similarities in the design. And even though I'm more concerned with the modern era of Joes, and these are the guys that I currently have on display. So if I'm missing a guy from that collection, I'm more concerned with seeking those guys out. But like I said, I'm kind of getting close to completing the vintage line, at least the first few years of it. So yeah, it was nice to find Taurus from 87. Now next up, I've got Sergeant Falcon, and this is the Sonic Fighter version of him from 1991. So the original version of Falcon was released in, I want to say maybe 88 or something, and he was in just kind of a much more like natural militaristic outfit. It was all kind of like various shades of green, and it was a really cool figure. Especially by those years, some of the characters were getting pretty outlandish, and if you were a fan of just kind of straight up military guys, Falcon was kind of a breath of fresh air because he was pretty normal looking. So this here, I think it's the exact same figure. They might have changed out the legs or something like that, but I think this is the exact same figure as the original, but then they just redid it in these Sonic Fighter colors. Now I'm not sure really what's going on with his camouflage here. You'll see his outfit is just kind of this all light gray, and then this kind of black digital camo. It's kind of a strange choice. I don't think it necessarily looks bad, but yeah, and of course none of his accessories are here or anything like that, which is okay. The Sonic Fighter guys tended to have giant backpacks that made noises. I definitely I didn't need that in my collection because they were pretty unsightly. Now, mind you, it would have been nice to have his guns. But even some of the guns at that point in the Real American Hero line were pretty big and useless, and they were bright colors. I don't remember what color Sonic Falcon's guns were, but I'm not too bent up about it that they're not here. I'm fine with just getting the figure. Now, in the modern era, they actually redid this figure at the very end of the line, just as the G.I.Joe Collectors Club lost their licensing deal with Hasbro to create figures. They squeaked out what they called the final 12 figures, and they put out these 12 figures kind of just right before they couldn't produce any new figures. And so they gave us this version of Sonic Fighter Falcon with his little helicopter backpack. Now, this was a cool figure too, basically because they took the base of what was already a pretty cool Falcon figure, and then they just gave it the Sonic Fighter paint job. I didn't really care for it that much, and this was not a figure I needed in my collection because I never had that one when I was a kid, so I didn't have any nostalgic ties to it. And I don't know, I think it stands out more in this figure that the camo is on the whole body except for the arms. And it looks odd. And when the figure was first shown to us, a lot of people complained about, like, how come it doesn't have the camo on the arms? But people said, well, the Collectors Club just was honoring the original figure, because you'll notice this figure does not have the camo on the arms either. But it's not nearly as noticeable because the sleeves are so much shorter. So it doesn't look so bad here, but here it's a lot more noticeable. Anyway, it's kind of cool that since I do have this figure and I've had it for a while, it's kind of cool to go back and get the original one that it was based on. And from 1992, we've got Dojo. Now, this is not a character I had when I was a kid, because I had stopped buying G.I. Joe in 1990, so I didn't have any of the 90s figures myself, like the ones from 91, 92, 93, and 94. But my little brother did. So some of these guys were around my house when I was, in my early teens or whatever. So I remember Dojo. My brother had him. And so he's kind of an interesting looking character. He's got this real hair ponytail, and he's got this cloth belt. I'm sure he had a bunch of other accessories like swords and whatnot, but none of that are here. And he's also got a weird action feature. You see how his arm just kind of flung up like that. Kind of a karate chop action. All of the Ninja Force figures had like some weird chop or kick, which, I don't know, maybe the kids in those days liked it, but I find it really annoying because you can't put them in certain poses because their legs are always stuck up in the air or something like that. So, yeah, Dojo's not a character that I have any particular fondness for. Guys like him are actually one of the reasons I stopped collecting Joe around 1990. I didn't like how they were getting so busy with Ninja Force and Sonic Fighters, and there was just too many little sub-teams, and it seemed to have kind of gotten away from the military brand that I started collecting and fell in love with. So yeah, I didn't really care for all these ninjas. But so Dojo here's another character that I never had as a kid, but I did have the modern era figure. Again, this one was produced by the Collectors Club, so this was not a regular retail release put out by Hasbro. But yeah, you can see, the similarities in there. Instead of the real hair, he's got a sculpted ponytail. But yeah, not a bad figure. And sort of like with Falcon there, it's kind of nice that now that I have the modern era figure, to be able to go back and get the vintage figure that inspired it. Now from 1992, this is Headman. So Headman was not a member of Cobra. He was actually a drug dealer who ran his own organization. And this was just kind of something, it seemed like Hasbro was trying anything to keep G.I. Joe relevant in the 90s. They were competing with like Ninja Turtles and Captain Planet. So that's why they kept introducing all these sub-teams. So they had Ninja Force, and they had the Eco Warriors, which were like environmental fighters. And then they had the Drug Elimination Force. I don't know if that was competing with Cops, the toy line, or what. But anyway, so they took a bunch of established G.I. Joes and put them in new outfits, and they were hunting down Headman and his headhunters, which were dealing drugs on the streets. And he's kind of a goofy character. Like, he looks like what a kid would imagine a drug dealer might look like. Like, it's hard to see the pinstripes on his suit, but he's basically wearing this kind of like zoot suit. And then his face is like the Hamburglar with this kind of silly mustache, and then the little burglar mask with a fedora and a ponytail. Like, this guy is straight up silly. I don't know what else to really say about him. So again, since he came out in 92, I didn't have him as a kid, but he's kind of a figure I always wanted to go back and get just because he's such an interesting little oddity. And I was hoping they were going to make him in the modern era. They never did. When that Dojo figure came out that I just showed you, this head sculpt was brand new. And when the Collectors Club gave us brand new head sculpts, you can tell they invested some money into this figure, because often what they would do is they would just take existing figures and repaint them for us. So when they took the time to sculpt a new head, everybody thought for sure that the Collectors Club would reuse this head, put a fedora on it, and we'd get it for Headman, because it looks like Dojo. Like it's a good head for Dojo, but it's also, it would have been perfect for Headman. Like the facial hair works, the mask painted black, the ponytail, it's even more like his. So yeah, we thought for sure that's what we were going to get with this head. But unfortunately, we never got a Headman in the modern era, so I never had a Headman in my collection until now. So it was kind of cool to track this guy down. Now from 1987, this is Psych-Out. Now this is kind of a weird character. So this guy did come out when I was collecting. However, this was one of my brother Doug's picks. And I'll tell you, he wasn't one of his top picks. He was probably one of the later guys picked when we were going through the back of the packaging. Because he's never been a favorite of either mine or my brother's. But, you know, he's not bad. He had kind of a weird military specialty. He had a bunch of weird, like, satellite dishes, and I think he was kind of like a psychologist, and he used those abilities. I can't remember now. I'll have to put his file card up here or something. But, yeah, so he's a cool figure, and this one's in good shape. Again, I'm impressed that none of these figures are missing thumbs, missing crotches, there's no paint wear. Yeah, so this is a really nice version of Psych-Out. Looks really good. It's in good shape. And even though he doesn't have any of his weapons, he does have this little antenna, which is, I believe, removable. And I don't even think my brother Doug had this on his figure when we were kids. I think that had gotten lost. So it's pretty crazy that that antenna is still standing after all these years and still looks good. So yeah, it's pretty cool to get this guy after so long. Because even though most of the holes in my vintage collection are from the later years, like from 90 onward, those are also the characters I'm less concerned about, because I don't have the nostalgic childhood attachment to them. But the holes in my collection from the 80s, those are all from characters that my brother had, but I didn't have. And so, you know, we always played together, and, you know, Psych-Out was a character that my brother used, and, you know, I felt like I knew this guy. So he's a character that I want. He was a character that was in the comic books here and there. So yeah, it's cool to finally get another version of him. I did have the modern era version of Psych-Out. Let me just bring him out here. And you see here, he's fully armed up with all of his little satellite gear. He's got the little antenna in the back of his head as well. And you can see the similarities. You know, it's a pretty good redo of this vintage toy. The colors are a little more subdued. The hair is not so bright. The shirt's not so fluorescent. But yeah, still pretty good. I actually think I prefer the vintage figure, to be honest with you, though. So that's pretty cool. Now this here is Windchill from 1989. Now this was the final year that me and my brother were still trying to collect the toy line completely. 1990 was the last year we bought figures, but we only got a few of the figures that were released. We had kind of already decided that we weren't going to continue to collect. But this year, 89, we were still buying everything, but we did not have this guy because he was a vehicle driver, and we were kind of getting out of the vehicles before we were getting out of the figures. We were always more interested in the characters, less so than the Jeeps and the tanks that they drove. So yeah, a lot of the holes in my vintage collection are vehicle drivers from the late 80s as well. So this guy here, I don't know anything about him, to be honest with you. Like, when I saw this guy laying there, I did not even know his name. I know the names of most G.I.Joe figures, but this guy here I just was not familiar with. So yeah, Windchill came with a vehicle. I don't know if he's ever appeared in any G.I. Joe media, the cartoons or the comic books. If he did, it wasn't a very memorable appearance, at least for me. I don't know. It's not a bad figure. Like, he looks fine. But, you know, I think he's, you know, obviously with the name Windchill, I think he's probably supposed to be like an Arctic trooper of some sort. But I already had so many of those by that point in time. I think I had all of them. Because when I was a kid, I had Snowjob, I had Frostbite, I had Iceberg, and I had Blizzard, and I had Avalanche. Those guys were all the winter guys. So that kind of niche was already filled on my G.I. Joe army. I don't know if I would have had much use for him even when I was a kid. But yeah, they never remade this character in the modern era. So this is the only version of Windchill to date that has ever been made. So I guess in that regard, it's kind of cool that I got this guy. Also, you'll notice he's holding a gun. He did have a gun in the baggie with him. I don't know if this is the gun he came with. Since he was a vehicle driver, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't even come with a gun. But he's the guy that I decided to arm up here. So there you go. There's Windchill. Now this here is Slice from 1992. So this is, again, this is a Ninja Force figure. This is a Cobra Ninja. And he had a partner, Dice. My little brother, had both of these guys in the 90s. I don't know why I don't have them. Because I think when my little brother stopped collecting G.I. Joe, I ended up with a few of his figures. I don't know, he might have given the rest to some friends or maybe even sold them off. I don't know. But I have Dice, and I think that might be my little brother's. So I've had Dice in my collection for quite some time, but I did not have his partner in crime, Slice. So it's nice to be able to finally track him down. Now, I would like the look of this guy. He's got this, I always consider it kind of like a fencing helmet. I don't know if that's what it's based on, but it looks like he's kind of got this, just this mesh mask. You can't see any of his facial features, so it makes him kind of mysterious. He's got cloth here on the back of his mask and cloth on the side of his belt. The costume design, it's a pretty simple kind of ninja design. Nothing too crazy there. The star pattern, it's maybe a little flamboyant for a ninja, but who am I to judge? Now, he does have that ninja feature I showed you with Dojo, and that's why he's saluting here constantly. It's not by choice. It's not patriotic. It's just the arm keeps going up like that, and that's because he's probably broken. I don't know if there's any way to make that stop going up. So that's kind of annoying, but there you go. That's Slice. Now, this is another guy. Even though I never owned the vintage figure, I did have the modern figure as produced by the Collectors Club, which was quite nice. I felt they recreated the vintage Slice quite nicely. They crafted a brand new head there, and he's got the same star pattern on his outfit. So yeah, pretty cool. So like the other guys I mentioned, I had the more modern version, but it's kind of fun to go back and get the vintage figure that inspired it. From 1988, this is Star Viper. Now this is actually the one figure I wanted to grab at the yard sale. I saw this figure in the photos that the guy had sent to my brother, and I was like, you know what, that would be a cool guy to get, because I remember there was a whole issue featuring Star Viper of the vintage G.I. Joe comic book, which it wasn't very often that a trooper would get to star in a book by himself. But every now and again, Larry Hama, the guy that wrote the G.I. Joe comic, would take one of these kind of nobodies and elevate them. Like he made he took a Cobra Viper and had them kill a bunch of named G.I. Joe characters in one of the issues. So that was pretty crazy that over all these issues, all these named Cobras that we know, like Cobra Commander, Destro, Zartan, were unable to kill a G.I. Joe, but then they bring in this Viper trooper, this nameless trooper, and he was able to kill a bunch. Now, I don't remember the specifics a ton of the Star Viper. I think he actually might have died in that same issue, but there was a whole issue that featured him. And yeah, this was a figure that I never had as a kid, partly because he came with a big Cobra jet at the time, so it would have been like a more expensive vehicle. And yeah, so he was a cool character. He had a little bit of background established from the comic book, and he was a figure that I figured would be kind of hard to track down just because he came with such a large vehicle, and people on the secondary market might be trying to sell him with the vehicle and whatnot. So yeah, I was really hoping that I could grab him at the yard sale, and I was pleasantly surprised that he was still there waiting for me when I got my chance to go look at the figures. So yeah, this guy's really cool. They've never redone him in the modern era, so yeah, very happy about this guy. From 1993, this is the Astro Viper version 2. Now this is probably the figure who, it's kind of the biggest bummer that I don't have his accessories, because the Astro Viper, he has the extra space helmet that goes over this kind of mask, and he has a flight backpack with little handlebars, so it was basically a little jetpack that he could go into outer space. So yeah, he's the guy that's, you know, it's not like I'm just missing a little gun and a backpack or something. He's kind of really missing his whole gear that makes him Astro Viper. Now, this figure here, so since he's from 93, I didn't have him as a kid. However, this is Astro Viper version 2. The original came out in 88. My brother had that one when we were kids, and I'm pretty sure I have that version now, although I don't know if my version has the backpack and stuff on that one either. But anyway, that would be the more important version to me, the 88 version, because that one's in like the darker colors. That's the colors I associate with Astro Viper. This isn't a bad looking figure, and if you didn't know he was missing all of his space gear and stuff, he still looks like a pretty cool trooper just on his own. Like that gold is, it's different and it's pretty striking. And yeah, the rest of the mold is a little boring. Like he could maybe use a little bit more detailing throughout. But considering it's supposed to be kind of a spacesuit, I guess that's why he's not loaded up with pouches and knives and things like that. But anyway, so yeah, this is a pretty cool figure. They've never redone him in the modern era. And yeah, he's just a fun little get. Similar to the Astro Viper, this is Flak Viper version 2, also from 1993. This is another kind of a cool trooper. Kind of a funny design. He reminds me of those guys in the 90s that you would wear overalls with just one strap done up. That's what he looks like when I look at him. But unlike Astro Viper, so this is version 2, but version 1 did not come out in the 80s when I was collecting. Version 1 just came out the year before in 1992. That version, I think, was more interesting. It had better color scheme. This one's a little more outlandish. So the 1992 version had a darker color scheme. I like that one better. And I never had either of them as a kid, but I do like the design. He almost looks more like a supervillain than a Cobra Trooper to me. Like I could totally see this guy fighting Spider-Man or something. Anyway, so I really do like the design. And like the Astro Viper, it's kind of a bummer he doesn't have his weapons, because the Flak Viper had some pretty cool weapons too if he was all armed up. But again, for $5, I'm not going to complain. I'm pretty happy to add this guy to my collection. Now, this last one I have to show you is probably the one I'm most excited to pick up. This is 1989's Dark Lawn. So, Dark Lawn, even though he came out in 89, when me and Doug were still collecting, neither of us had him. It's because he came with a vehicle, and like I said, we had kind of already given up on vehicles maybe a year or two before we had stopped collecting the figures. And this guy is a weirdo. Like, if you look at him, he's got like a Darth Vader mask with glowing red eyes. And then he's got this, like, it looks like crocodile skin. Like, he's got this green, and you're like, is this a sweater? If it's a sweater, why does it cover his entire head? And then it's got these kind of tiger stripes on it. And then he's got red pants with orange boots and some gold highlights. Just a weird-looking dude. Kind of a mishmash of stuff. But the reason he's kind of so fun for me to get. So he's Destro's cousin, and this guy was featured in the comic books a fair bit, and he's just kind of a character that had the most importance. Even a character like Psycho, who's been around for a couple years longer, you know, Psycho was kind of a secondary character, whereas Dark Lawn was a member of Destro's kind of Iron Grenadiers. I think he might have tried to overthrow Destro at one point. I can't remember all of his backstory. But he's just a fun character and such a goofy design that how could you not love this guy? They made 2 versions of him in the modern era. I have them both. This is the one that's most accurate to the vintage figure. And it's got all the same weirdness, if not even weirder, because he's got 2 thigh-high orange boots. His sweater there, it's more clear that it's a sweater because of the way it's like stitched and ribbed there on the sweater. But it still covers up his entire head, which is kind of strange. Still got the Darth Vader mask. Kind of got these floating shoulder pads. It's a weird design, but I really like these figures. And both of the Dark Lawn figures produced by the club were pretty hard to get and pretty expensive on the secondary market. So I'm glad that I have both of them. But yeah, it's kind of fun to have the vintage one that inspired them. And this is a great figure in its own right, even though if it's super weird. Okay, so that was my G.I.Joe yard sale haul. So yeah, pretty cool. If you have any comments, questions on the video, please leave them below. What do you think of this format? Should I continue to shoot this way? Is this a good angle? Do my chins look okay? If I do continue to shoot this way, should I get some more stuff in the background? Like, I don't know, maybe this is good and that it's not so distracting. There's not so much stuff to look at behind me, or maybe it's kind of boring to look at. I don't know. So let me know what you think of this setup. And yeah, please, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. And yeah, I'll be back and I will see you soon. Thanks for watching.